at 3:17, the valley offered only two colors through Jonah Mercer's tubes: the pale wash of starlight on shale and the darker absence of everything that could hide a man with a rifle. Too many snipers on us. Someone breathed on the net. Mercer didn't answer. He was on his stomach, ribs pressed into broken rock at 2,940 meters, watching the ridgeline that had pinned them for 11 minutes. The muzzle flashes were disciplined. No strobing panic, no wasted rounds, just brief, surgical blinks from positions that should have been empty. To his left, in a fold of ground no wider than 1.8 meters, the woman they'd been told was an analyst unhooked her pack with one hand and began removing items in a sequence that looked less like preparation and more like habit. She did it without light. She did it without looking down. Her fingers moved as if the kit were indexed in her nerves. Mercer had been watching people under fire since 1992. He recognized prayer. He recognized denial. He recognized the 2-second stillness before someone ran. What he did not recognize was the way she measured the darkness, once, with a glance that lasted maybe 0.6 seconds, and then stopped being a passenger in the situation. She slid something slim out of the side pocket, carbon, matte, no reflective edge, and pressed it into the dirt beside her knee. Her head turned, not toward the gunfire, but toward the wind, as if the wind had spoken. Then she looked at Mercer. No request, no announcement, just a look that asked a question he didn't have language for yet. Are you going to stay where you are? A round struck the rock above them and split it with a sound like a hammer on porcelain. Pebbles peppered Mercer's cheek, stung, and fell into the collar of his shirt. He didn't flinch. He'd learned long ago that flinching was a kind of permission. The woman rose anyway. Not upright, never upright. She unfolded into a low crouch, weight distributed, knees tracking soft, shoulders narrow. And then she stepped into the open space between two boulders as if the snipers had already been accounted for. In Mercer's earpiece, someone cursed once, clipped short, then silence. She vanished into the dark at 3:19. And the strangest part was how quickly the valley seemed to accept her absence, as if she had never been there. This was the first thing Mercer would remember years afterward. Not the after-action briefings or the medals that didn't fit in anyone's life, but the way a person could move into a place meant for dying and make it look like work. A very small sound. Then, nothing. The mission had started 9 days earlier, under fluorescent lights that made everyone look tired in the same shade. Mercer had been flown from Langley to a forward airstrip that did not appear on any commercial chart, landing at 22:08 in AC. 1:30 that smelled of hydraulic fluid and old coffee. The airfield sat at 1,120 meters and ran 1,400 meters of cracked asphalt along a ridge that dropped into blackness. He'd stepped off the ramp into wind that carried dust and the faint mineral bite of distant snow. He'd been a SEAL once, enough years to have watched the teams change uniforms, calibers, and politics. 32 years of training, deployments, and quiet decisions. Then a second life in the same work under a different letterhead. He was credentialed in the way only time could credential a man. He had survived the eras that killed the ones who talked too much. The brief came from a man named Cal Weller, 41, a case officer with hands that stayed too clean. Weller spoke for 14 minutes, used 3 maps, and never once said the word contractor with affection. Target. A ledger physical, 4 centimeters thick, bound in gray cloth. The ledger belonged to a man named Dr. Samir Rahim, 58, formerly employed by a medical NGO, currently employed by Fear. Rahim had been the logistic spine for a private security firm that worked in the gaps between official war and deniable war. The firm's name, Echelon Fidelity, wasn't printed on the maps, but it sat behind 7 checkpoints, 3 local militias, and 1 communications network that seemed to know more than it should. Rahim wanted out. Rahim wanted protection. Rahim had also, according to Sigint, been marked for death within 72 hours. The insertion would be by rotary at night. 1-hour flight time, low level, weather permitting. Exfil would depend on whether Rahim lived long enough to be carried. A SEAL platoon would handle ground action. Mercer would be liaison, eyes judgment, and, if required, a voice that could say no to a plan that was sliding off reality. Weller slid a folder across the table. Added asset, he said. Mercer opened it. A photograph. A woman, late 20s by the face, early 40s by the eyes. The photo was taken in daylight, rare for this kind of file, and it caught a detail most photos missed. The left ear, where a pale line ran from the mastoid down into hair. Surgical. Not cosmetic. Name, Lena Voss. Role, technical analyst. Language, terrain. Mercer read the listed languages. English, Dari, Pashto, Russian, and 2 dialects that had no official name in the file, only geographic coordinates and a note. Mountain variant. He read the training line, expecting the usual soft phrasing that hid a lack of substance. It didn't. 6 years, high-altitude mobility. 3 years, signals intercept support. 2 years, special collection. None of it was attributed to a unit. No school names. No course numbers. Just dates, durations, and the kind of specificity that suggested the writer assumed the reader would know what wasn't being said. Mercer looked up. Who trained her, he said. Weller's eyes flicked once to the ceiling, then back. A small tell. He'd been coached. She's not yours, Weller said. She's ours. Mercer set the file down. That phrase, she's ours, was old language. Mercer had heard it in 1999 in a different building, from a man who later died in a car accident that had no skid marks. Weller added, she'll be embedded with Platoon Echo. Team leaders, a senior chief named Harlan Bishop. Good reputation. Skeptical by design. Mercer's mouth tightened. By design, he repeated. Weller didn't blink. At 23:12, Mercer left the briefing room and walked across the tarmac toward a row of plywood huts. He passed a line of operators checking gear under red light. Helmets, plates, medical kits, radios. The familiar inventory of modern war. He saw the silhouette of a helicopter farther down the line, bulk and rotor mast. A shape that had moved men into trouble for decades. Source. He told himself the added asset was someone's attempt at redundancy. He had been wrong about that before. Platoon Echo staged 2 nights later, at 1:40, in a hangar lit by 4 sodium lamps. The men wore the quiet focus of people who had done this more than 20 times and expected to do it 20 more if they lived. Mercer had met soldiers who were brave. He'd met fewer who were procedural. Platoon Echo was procedural. Senior Chief Harlan Bishop, 38, ran the last checks with a grease pencil and an expression that didn't change. He was built like a man who'd learned how to carry weight efficiently. No wasted muscle, no decoration. His reputation, Mercer knew, had been earned in places where reputations ended. Bishop turned when Mercer approached. Master Chief Mercer, he said. Heard you got promoted into a suit. Different uniform, Mercer said. Bishop's eyes held Mercer's for 2 seconds, then moved past him to the hangar door. And the analyst, Bishop said, as if tasting the word. She's on your manifest, Mercer said. She's on my manifest, Bishop agreed. The same words, different meaning. They watched her approach. She moved through the hangar with a pack that looked heavy. 30 kilos by the way the straps bit into her shoulders. And she carried it like she'd spent years with that exact weight. Her hair was tied back, not tight, just contained. No jewelry. No visible insignia. The only thing that marked her as different at first glance was the fact that she wasn't shaped like the men. At closer distance, Mercer saw the anomaly. Her hands. Her right thumb had a slight flattening at the distal joint, as if it had been fractured and healed without care. Her left index finger had a pale crescent scar across the knuckle, thin and clean, the kind of scar made by a blade, not shrapnel. Her nails were clipped to the quick. Her fingertips had the faint, persistent roughness of rope work. She stopped 1 meter from Bishop and didn't offer her hand. Voss, she said. Bishop waited, as if expecting a longer introduction that would give him leverage. Nothing came. He nodded once. You know what we do, Bishop said. I read what you did, Voss said. Not a compliment. Not reverence. A statement of prior study. Bishop's mouth tightened. Mercer watched her eyes while Bishop spoke. She tracked his face, but not the obvious points. She watched the jaw, the throat, the places that moved when a person swallowed the wrong emotion. Bishop gestured to a table. We're moving 12.6 clicks from LZ to objective, he said. Elevation gained 730 meters. Time on the ground 4 hours, 10 minutes if everything goes clean. You're here to keep us from getting lost. Voss looked down at the map. Not long, 3 seconds, maybe 4, then looked back up. The creek line on the east isn't a creek, she said. It's a seasonal cut. If you follow it at night, you'll end in a bowl with one exit. The bowl's at 2,880 meters, and the exit's a choke. Bishop stared at her. Mercer watched Bishop update, not his beliefs, but his calculations. That was the thing about professionals. They didn't feel insulted. They adjusted. Where'd you walk that? Bishop said. Voss tapped the map with her finger once. A precise tap. Not walked, she said. Watched. Bishop's eyes narrowed. Mercer felt the first small tug of recognition, not toward her face, but toward the language. Watched. Not seen. Not studied. Watched, as if the terrain were something alive. Bishop turned to Mercer. You vouching for her? He asked. Mercer did not answer immediately. He watched Voss while Bishop waited. Her breathing was slow, about 6 breaths per minute, and her shoulders were loose. There was no performance in her stillness. It wasn't calm. It was baseline. I'm not here to vouch, Mercer said. I'm here to notice. Bishop gave a short nod, as if that was the most he'd expected from a retired Master Chief now, wearing a different patch. Voss began checking her own kit without being told. She laid out items in rows. A small handheld device, a folded strip of fabric that might have been a tourniquet, a compact optic wrapped in cloth, and a radio that was not the same model as the SEALs carried. The radio's casing was scuffed, but the scuffs were old. It had been used hard and kept. Bishop noticed it too. That radio isn't ours, he said. It hears more than yours, Voss said. Bishop's expression didn't change, but his right hand flexed once. A tell Mercer had seen in men trying not to show irritation. Mercer filed it away. At 2:22, the hangar doors opened. The wind came in. The helicopter outside whined and chopped the air into pieces. The men lifted their packs in one motion and walked out as a group. Voss fell into step without being directed. 3 places from the rear, where a person who understood formations would put herself if she didn't want to be protected and didn't want to be a liability. Mercer watched the way her head moved as she approached the aircraft, tracking rotor wash, dust, and the small objects that could turn into shrapnel in a downwash. She wasn't impressed by the machine. She was counting it. The flight lasted 58 minutes. Inside the helicopter, the world became vibration and dim green light. The men sat facing inward, knees almost touching. The air smelled of sweat, cordite residue from old missions, and the metal tang of aviation fuel. Mercer wore and /PVS 31S, dual-tube night vision, crisp enough to show stones as stones, not smears. They were state-of-the-art, and they still made human beings into ghosts. Source. Bishop leaned forward to speak to Mercer over the noise. Your asset, he said, chin angled slightly toward Voss. She doesn't look like she's ever been cold. Mercer looked at Voss. She sat still, hands resting on her knees, harness clipped, chin slightly down. She did not sway with the aircraft the way most people did. She moved with it, minute adjustments in her core, like someone standing on a boat in rough water. Cold's a variable, Mercer shouted back. Some people learned early. Bishop watched her for another 3 seconds, then looked away. Across from Mercer sat a younger operator. Petty Officer Second Class Evan Cade, 26, a new addition to Echo, the kind of man who still carried a certain tightness in his face, as if trying to hold his identity in place. Cade leaned toward Mercer. She's really just an analyst, he said. Mercer didn't answer. Cade took Mercer's silence as permission to continue. Because if she's not, Cade said, then someone's playing games with our manifest. Mercer looked at him through green-tinted darkness. That's always true, Mercer said, even when it's not useful to think about. Cade sat back, lips pressed together. Skepticism, Mercer knew, was often just a form of self-protection. At 3:18, the helicopter banked. The mountains rose beneath them, ridge lines like broken teeth. The pilot held low, using terrain to mask the aircraft. Mercer watched the ground pass, Estimated speed at roughly 120 knots. Altitude maybe 200 feet above the nearest line of rock. The aircraft did not feel like bravery. It felt like math. Voss's eyes were open. She watched the same ground, but her gaze didn't track the ridge like Mercer's did. She tracked the negative space, the gaps where a man could be, the slopes that would funnel sound, the basins that would trap cold air and scent. Mercer realized she wasn't looking for beauty. She was looking for problems. A re-hook landed without fanfare. The analyst was doing the same thing Mercer did, but faster. Very quiet work. They inserted at 3:53. The ramp dropped. Cold air punched into the cabin. The men moved out, boots hitting ground in practice sequence. The LZ was a strip of gravel 70 meters long, tucked behind a spur. The helicopter stayed for 19 seconds, then lifted and disappeared. Rotor wash throwing dust that glittered in night vision like shards of glass. Mercer's watch ticked. He heard his own breath through his mask. The team formed up. Bishop signaled movement. They began the 12.6-kilometer walk toward the objective, a compound said to be 3 buildings, 1 courtyard, and 2 sentry positions. The approach route had been chosen for concealment, not comfort. A goat trail, narrow, with a drop on one side and a slope on the other. Within 7 minutes, Mercer noticed the first anomaly. Voss never adjusted her straps. Men adjusted straps. Even the best. The body shifts under load. The pack rides. The shoulder burns. The hand reaches back, pulls, readjusts. It was involuntary, like swatting a fly. Voss didn't do it once. Her pack sat, as if it had been fitted by someone who knew her bones. At 4:12, they crossed a dry cut, 3 meters wide, and dropped into a channel where rock walls rose to shoulder height. Bishop halted the team. He raised a fist. The men froze. Mercer waited for the obvious. Distant voices, animals, movement. Instead, Voss turned her head slightly and looked up at the ridge line to the west, 2 o'clock, then held her gaze there for exactly 2 seconds. Bishop followed her line of sight. "What?" he mouthed, not into the radio. To her. Voss didn't answer immediately. She crouched, scooped a pinch of dust, and let it fall. The dust drifted left, slow, then disappeared. "Wind changes there," she said, pointing with her chin. "It's a seam." "A seam," Bishop repeated. "It will carry sound," she said. "And smell." Bishop stared at the ridge as if he could see the seam. Mercer could not see it. He could infer it. He could accept it. But he could not see it the way she seemed to. Cade, behind them, made a small sound in his throat, a suppressed scoff. Bishop heard it. "Problem," Bishop mouthed, eyes still forward. Cade shook his head. "No, Senior," Cade mouthed back. "Just a seam." Bishop's eyes cut to him, hard. Cade shut his mouth. Mercer watched Voss's face in profile. No reaction. She wasn't competing for status. She was mapping the valley with senses that had been trained beyond the usual. At 5:06, as dawn threatened but did not arrive, only a slight paling in the east, they reached a hide position, a shallow depression behind 2 boulders, 40 centimeters of cover at best. Bishop signaled a short halt. "Water." "Check." Silence. Mercer drank 120 milliliters, enough to wet his throat. He watched the men's hands for tremor. None. He watched for the small signs of fear. None. Professionals. Voss drank last. When she lifted her canteen, Mercer saw her wrist and the faint, pale ring of a healed burn around it, as if something hot had once cinched there for too long. Mercer had seen burns like that on men who'd escape restraints. He looked at her face again. She was watching the ridge. Cade leaned toward Mercer, voice barely audible through the mask. "She's not even sweating," he said. "We've been moving 73 minutes with 30 kilos. Mercer didn't answer directly. "Watch your feet," Mercer said. Cade frowned, then looked. Voss's boots landed without slap. Quiet. She didn't strike heel first the way most people did under load. She placed mid-foot, rolled, distributed. A gait learned in steep places where noise was death. Cade looked away, unsettled. The question had begun to take shape in Mercer's mind, not as a thought, but as a tension. A withheld name. Not yet. The first contact came at 6:21. They were 1.3 kilometers from the objective, moving along a terrace that ran parallel to a riverbed. The river itself was a thin line of ice, broken in places where water still moved, making a sound like glass being rubbed together. Bishop signaled stop. The men dropped. Mercer saw what Bishop saw, a shape ahead, 90 meters low to the ground, moving across the trail. Not a man, a dog, thin, feral. It sniffed, paused, then moved on. Bishop waited 12 seconds, then waved them forward. They moved. At 6:24, a sound came from above, stone shifting, small but wrong. Mercer froze. So did Voss. Bishop's fist rose. The team halted. Mercer angled his head to listen. Wind. River. A bird, maybe. Then, from high ground, a second stone shifted. Voss's left hand lifted, palm down, not a seal hand signal, but a universal one. Hold. Her eyes were on the slope at 10 o'clock, where the rock face broke into a talus field. Mercer brought his tubes up, scanned. Nothing. Bishop leaned toward her. You hear something, he mouthed. Voss's lips moved without sound. Not something, she mouthed back. Someone. Bishop's posture tightened. Mercer's skin prickled. At 6:25, a shot cracked. It didn't hit anyone. It hit the rock 30 centimeters from Cade's boot, sending chips into his shin. Cade jerked back, then forced himself still. The shot was not a warning. It was a measurement. It told them the shooter could reach them and wanted them to know it. Bishop's voice snapped into the radio, controlled. Contact I. Break line. Move to cover. Now. The men moved, low, fast, into the shallow shadow of the terrace wall. Mercer followed, keeping his profile small. Voss moved too, but she did something Mercer did not expect. She looked down at the ground. Not at her feet. At the dust. She watched the dust for 1 second. Then her head turned sharply toward a point on the slope. Mercer followed her gaze. Still nothing. A second shot cracked. It struck higher, a ricochet that sang. The shooter was adjusting. Bishop signaled smoke, concealment. A canister popped, hissed, and began to spill white into the thin air. Mercer watched Voss's face. She did not blink when the second round hit. Her breathing did not change. She reached into her pack and pulled out a small device, flat, dark, and held it up for 2 seconds, then angled it toward the slope. A rangefinder? Thermal? Mercer wasn't sure. Bishop hissed, "What is that?" Voss didn't answer. She pressed a button. Mercer heard nothing. But Voss's eyes shifted, micro-adjustments, as if reading data. Then she said quietly into the radio, "Shooter is not alone." Bishop's jaw tightened. "How many?" he asked. Voss paused 1 second. "More than one," she said. "At least 3. Cade's eyes widened behind his tubes. Bishop swore once, clipped. "Objective still primary," Bishop said. "We don't get pinned here. Mercer, you see anything?" Mercer scanned again. His training screamed at him to find the glint, the movement, the outline. He saw only rock. Voss touched Bishop's sleeve. A small gesture, not subordinate, not familiar, just urgent. "If you move down into the riverbed," she said, "you will be in a funnel. They are waiting for that." Bishop stared at her. "How do you know?" he said. Voss's eyes stayed on the slope. "Because they missed on purpose," she said. That sentence landed in Mercer like a weight. A rehook. A subverted expectation. Misses as intent. Bishop changed the plan without acknowledging the change. He signaled a lateral move along the terrace, using the wall as cover, aiming for a stand to scrub 120 meters ahead that might break line of sight. They moved in pairs, 3 seconds apart. Mercer watched Voss move. She did not run. She flowed low, using small depressions, pausing exactly where the rock cast shadow. She timed her movement to the wind, as if the wind were a metronome. A third shot cracked. It struck the wall above them, showering debris. Then a fourth shot. Closer. The snipers were no longer measuring. They were beginning. Bishop got the team into the scrub. The vegetation was thin, knee-high, but it broke outlines. He crouched, breathing controlled. "Report," he said. No one was hit. Not yet. Mercer looked at Voss. "What are you seeing?" he asked, not an accusation. "In need." Voss didn't look at him when she answered. "I'm seeing a pattern," she said. "They're not local. Bishop's eyes narrowed. Explain. They're spacing, Voss said. They're communicating. They're not firing for body count yet. They want us to commit to a direction. Mercer felt the outline of the question sharpen. Who trained her to read that? At 6:33, the shooting stopped. No final shot. No retreat sound. Just absence. The quiet was wronger than the gunfire. Bishop held the team in place for 4 minutes. No one spoke. The only sound was the river below and the distant creak of ice. Mercer watched Voss. She had her hand on the small device again, thumb resting near the button. Her eyes were half-lidded, as if conserving moisture. Cade leaned toward Bishop, whispering. "We should pull back," he said. "They've got overwatch. They're set." Bishop's head turned a fraction. "Pull back to where?" Bishop said. "LZ is 12 clicks behind us. Objective is 1 click ahead. We came for a man who dies in 72 hours. We don't get a second night." Cade swallowed. He nodded once, forced. Mercer watched that nod. Skepticism could be trained out of a man by necessity, but it left residue. Bishop looked to Voss. "You got us through," he said. "Now you tell me how we keep moving." Voss took 2 seconds. Her eyes moved along the ridge line, then down, then back. "We move when they don't want us to," she said. "We go higher." Bishop stared. "That puts us closer." "Yes," Voss said. "Closer is not always worse." Mercer saw Bishop weigh it. He did not like it. He did not trust it. But he had already seen her be right when no one else had even named the problem. He signaled. They moved uphill. The question had an outline now. Mercer wasn't ready to name it, but the outline was there. By 8:10, they were above the terrace, climbing into rock that cut their hands and forced them to move single file. The objective compound lay somewhere ahead, hidden by folds of land. The sun was up, but in the mountains daylight did not mean visibility. It meant harsher shadows. They reached a saddle at 2,760 meters. From there, Mercer could see the valley floor, a thin ribbon of road, one vehicle moving slowly, dust behind it. The compound, 3 buildings, a courtyard, sat 600 meters farther, blending with stone. A place designed to look like nothing. Bishop went prone behind a boulder. He brought his optic up. Mercer lay beside him. Voss stayed back 2 meters, not crowding, eyes scanning the slopes behind them, not the objective ahead. "Rahim is inside," Bishop said, watching the compound. 2 guards visible. One in courtyard, one on roof. Probably more inside. "We move at 9:30, hit fast, out in 6 minutes." Mercer listened. The plan was clean on paper. Voss spoke without turning her head. "They are watching this saddle," she said. Bishop stiffened. "What?" Voss lifted her left hand, pointed to a patch of rock 40 meters away. It looked like rock. Mercer followed her point. He saw nothing. Then, for 0.2 seconds, something shifted. An edge that didn't match the stone. A lens? A scope? A piece of cloth in wind? Mercer's stomach tightened. Bishop swore softly. "How long have they been there?" Bishop asked. Voss didn't answer immediately. "Since before we arrived," she said. Bishop's jaw worked. "Then why didn't they shoot?" Voss's answer came flat. "Because they want you to go down." Mercer felt the plan tilt. He watched Bishop's eyes. Bishop's mind was fast, but it was still bound by expectations. Sniper shoot, teams maneuver, someone wins. Voss was describing something else. A containment. Mercer leaned closer to Bishop. "If they're holding fire," Mercer said, "they're coordinating with something at the objective." Bishop's eyes narrowed. "Ambush in the compound," he said. Mercer nodded once. Bishop reached for his radio. Before he could speak, Voss touched his forearm again. Brief, controlled. "Not an ambush," she said. "A selection." Bishop stared at her. "A selection," he repeated. Voss finally looked at him. "They are deciding who you are," she said. "How you respond. What you prioritize." Mercer felt the hair on his arms lift under his sleeves. A rehook. A withheld larger threat. Bishop pulled his arm away gently, not angry, but asserting control. "Then we deny them data," Bishop said. He signaled the team to shift. They moved 30 meters left, crawling, using rock cover. Mercer followed. Voss did not crawl immediately. She stayed still for 3 seconds, eyes fixed on the distant patch of rock where the watcher hid. Then she moved. Mercer watched her path. She didn't take the obvious cover to cover. She used a line that looked less safe but offered fewer predictable pauses. She was avoiding pattern. At 8:17, a shot cracked. It hit the boulder Voss had left behind 1 second earlier. Bishop's head snapped toward her. Voss didn't look back. Mercer felt something shift in him, a small internal concession. That wasn't luck. It was timing. Timing built by experience. Cade behind them breathed, "What is she?" No one answered. The day dragged toward 9:30. They held position, watching the compound, watching the slopes, listening to the quiet. Mercer's throat dried. He drank 60 milliliters. He watched the objective for movement. A guard on the roof shifted, scratched his face, lit a cigarette. The smoke rose thin. Voss watched the cigarette smoke too. She leaned toward Mercer, voice low. "See that?" she said, indicating the smoke column. Mercer nodded. "It bends," she said. "Wind changes every 17 seconds. They will use that." "Use it how?" Mercer asked. Voss didn't answer. She looked away. Mercer realized she had given him a clue, but not a conclusion. She was building her own picture, and Mercer was being allowed to witness the edges. At 9:28, Bishop raised 2 fingers, then clenched his fist. "Move." The team began their descent toward the compound, using gullies and rock to stay low. The distance was 620 meters. Time on target planned, 6 minutes. Time to exfil to a pickup point, 14 minutes. Mercer felt the familiar narrowing in his mind as action approached. The world became angles and distances and the weight of his rifle against his chest. The first shot of the second engagement came at 9:31. It struck the dirt 20 centimeters in front of Bishop's hand. Bishop froze. A second shot struck 1 meter to the right, near Cade. They were being bracketed. Bishop whispered into the radio, "Snipers. Multiple. Stay low." Mercer's heart rate rose, but stayed controlled. He had been shot at enough times to know what fear felt like. This wasn't fear yet. This was comprehension. A third shot cracked. It hit an operator's pack, tearing fabric, spilling something dark. Water? Blood? It wasn't clear. The man grunted, then kept moving, one-handed. Voss moved to him without being told. She pressed her hand to the pack, found the leak. Water. She reached into her kit, pulled out a strip of tape, sealed it in 8 seconds. "Move," she said. Not comforting, not gentle. Instruction. The operator moved. Bishop watched her do it. He didn't thank her. He filed it. They dropped into a shallow gully 1.2 meters deep. The gully ran toward the compound, but also channeled them into a predictable line. Mercer saw at the same moment Voss did. Voss stopped, then backed out of the gully. Bishop hissed, "Voss, down." Voss shook her head once. "Not down," she said. A round struck the gully's far wall, showering dirt into the trench like rain. Bishop's face hardened. "She's right," Mercer said. Bishop looked at Mercer. "Explain," Bishop said, voice clipped. "They're hurting us," Mercer said. "Gully is a kill line." Bishop's jaw tightened. He signaled the team to exit the gully, spread out, climb onto the slope. The moment they did, shots shifted. Less accurate, longer intervals. Voss had been right again. At 9:38, they were 280 meters from the compound. Close enough to see detail. Too close to retreat without cost. Bishop whispered into the radio, "Too many snipers on us." Mercer heard the phrase again, now spoken with the weight of a man who did not exaggerate. The mission tilted from raid to survival. And then the pre-climax test arrived, quiet, almost domestic in its cruelty. A child stepped into the courtyard. A boy, maybe 9, carrying a bucket. He walked from one building to another, unaware, bareheaded in the sun. The guard on the roof glanced at him, then away. Bishop's breath caught. "They're using him," Cade whispered, horrified. Mercer watched Voss. Her gaze locked onto the boy for 1 second. Then moved beyond him to the roofline, to the corners, to the angles where a sniper might have line of sight. Bishop's voice came tight over the net. "We don't shoot unless we're sure," he said. "No collateral." The snipers fired again. not at the seals. At the ground near the boy's feet, dust jumped. The boy startled, froze, bucket sloshing. He looked around, confused. The snipers were not just hurting the seals. They were forcing timing. Bishop's hand trembled once, tiny, then steadied. Mercer felt something cold settle in him. He had seen enemies do many things. This was calculated cruelty, disguised as tactics. Voss moved. She slid forward along the slope, low, using rocks as cover, closing distance to a position 40 meters ahead that offered a better angle into the courtyard. Bishop grabbed her shoulder. "Where are you going?" he mouthed. Voss looked at his hand on her shoulder, then at his eyes. "I'm fixing your timing," she said. Bishop's grip loosened, without permission from his pride. Voss moved into the forward position. She drew her rifle, compact, suppressed, not the standard issue in the platoon. It looked like something assembled for a purpose rather than issued for a policy. Mercer watched her settle behind the rock. Her breathing slowed. Her shoulders dropped. She became part of the terrain. A shot cracked from the ridge. It struck the rock above her head, splitting it. Voss did not flinch. She adjusted her position by 6 centimeters, as if shifting in a chair. Mercer's mind named something without voicing it. Competence as biography. Cade whispered, "She's going to get herself killed." Mercer did not answer. Voss's rifle moved, not toward the ridge, but toward the courtyard wall. She tracked something Mercer could not see. Her finger rested near the trigger, not on it. The boy in the courtyard took one step. A shot cracked again closer. The round struck the wall behind him, throwing fragments. The boy dropped, hands over his head. Bishop's voice was taut. "We go now," he said. "We breach." Mercer looked at Voss. Voss did not look back. Her attention stayed on the courtyard. Then, in 1.2 seconds, she fired once. The shot was so muted Mercer almost missed it. A small cough under the larger sounds of the valley. The guard on the roof jerked and collapsed out of sight. No cheer. No call-out. Just an absence where a threat had been. The boy stayed curled on the ground, alive, bucket spilled. Water seeping into dust. Bishop stared at the roofline. "That was suppressed," Cade breathed. "From that angle. Through." Bishop cut him off with a hand signal. "Move." They moved. Voss had solved the problem before most of them had named it. The skeptic's motto revised, not in words, but in the way Cade's mouth shut and stayed shut. A re-hook landed. She had just taken a shot under counter-sniper fire and used it to protect someone who wasn't part of the mission. Then she began packing up again, as if the roof guard had been a minor correction. They breached at 9:44. Bishop's stack hit the courtyard wall, moved to the gate, cut the lock in 3 seconds, pushed through. Mercer followed, second line, eyes scanning corners. The courtyard was smaller than the satellite images suggested, maybe 12 meters by 18. The buildings were stone, old, patched with newer mortar. The air smelled of goats, dust, and cooking oil. The boy was still on the ground, shaking. Shots cracked from outside the compound now, striking stone, chipping edges. The snipers had adjusted to the new geometry. Bishop shouted in a low voice, "Find Rahim." Now. They cleared the first building in 47 seconds. Empty. The second building had 2 men inside, armed, startled. The SEALs moved with the brutal efficiency of training. 2 shots each, controlled, center mass, then past them. No pause. Mercer hated how normal it had become. They found Rahim in the third building, in a back room, sitting on the floor with his hands bound and his face bruised. He was thinner than his file photo, beard gray, eyes bloodshot. The ledger sat on a table beside him, wrapped in cloth as if it were a relic. Rahim looked up as Bishop entered. His mouth opened, but no sound came out. He tried again. Mercer knelt 1.5 meters from him. "Dr. Rahim," Mercer said, "we're taking you out. Stand if you can." Rahim's eyes darted, terrified. "They are here," he rasped. "They are already here." Bishop cut Rahim's bindings. The doctor's hands were numb. He flexed them, wincing. Cade grabbed the ledger, shoved it into a pouch. Outside, shots continued. The snipers had line of sight into the courtyard through gaps in the wall. The compound was a box with holes in it. Bishop keyed the radio. Objective secured, he said. We are exfiling to pick up Point Delta. ETA 14 minutes. The response crackled. Aircraft inbound. Time, 17 minutes. 17 minutes was an eternity when people wanted you dead. They moved Raheem into the courtyard, forming a protective diamond. The boy was still curled in dirt. Voss appeared at the gate. How she'd moved from her forward position into the compound without Mercer seeing, he didn't know. Her eyes scanned the ridge. Bishop shouted, "Voss, we're moving." Voss nodded once. Then she did something Mercer had not expected from any technical analyst. She handed Bishop a small folded object. Bishop took it, looked. A strip of fabric. On it, drawn in pencil, were 7 marks, dots, arranged like a constellation, each annotated with a number and a short line. Distances? Times? Bearings? Mercer couldn't see clearly, but he saw the shape of it. A map of threats. Bishop's face changed. Not fear. Not disbelief. Recognition. How many? Bishop asked. Voss spoke into his ear, voice low enough only he and Mercer could hear. 7, she said. 2 moved since 6:30. 1 is on the saddle still. 1 is not a sniper. Bishop stared at her. Not a sniper, he repeated. A controller, Voss said. He is watching our reactions. He is counting shots. Mercer felt the narrative shift again. Snipers were not the only danger. A larger mind behind the rifles. Justice delayed had a face somewhere out there, watching. Bishop's voice tightened. Can you take them? He asked. Mercer expected Voss to say no, or to offer a plan, or to ask for support. Voss did none of those things. She looked at the boy on the ground, then at Raheem, then at Bishop. Keep them alive, she said. Then she looked at Mercer. Not asking permission, not seeking approval. Just an acknowledgement that he was one of the few present who might understand what she was about to do. Mercer's throat tightened. Voss, Mercer said, if you go alone. Voss cut him off with a glance that lasted 0.5 seconds. If I don't, she said, you will lose time you cannot replace. Bishop's jaw clenched. Cade blurted, Senior, this is not. Bishop looked at Voss. You're wounded? He asked, scanning her quickly. Voss's right sleeve had a dark smear near the forearm. Blood. Not heavy, but present. Superficial, she said. Mercer watched her forearm. The smear pattern suggested a graze, not a deep hit. She had not treated it. She had prioritized motion. Bishop's eyes narrowed. You have 17 minutes until air, he said. Voss nodded once. I have 12, she said. She adjusted her pack, not the straps. Never the straps, just the weight distribution. She checked her rifle, pressed her cheek to the stock for 1 second, then lifted her head. The shooting outside the compound paused again, as if the snipers were listening. Mercer realized they were. They were waiting for the SEALs to move into open ground with Raheem and the boy. They wanted the team to choose between mission and restraint. Voss stepped to the edge of the gate and looked up at the ridge. Too many snipers on us, Bishop whispered again, but this time it sounded less like complaint and more like a statement of fact that could be solved. Voss didn't answer. She slipped through the gate at 9:49. 1 step, then another, then the dark swallowed her, and Mercer felt the air change, as if the valley itself had taken a breath and was holding it. A single muted cough in the distance. Then silence. And Mercer, watching the ridge through his tubes, understood the most unsettling part. The snipers still hadn't realized she was there. Not yet. The first thing Mercer noticed, after she slipped through the gate, was the way the firing rhythm changed. It wasn't that the shot stopped. It was that the pauses grew uneven. 2 seconds, then 6, then 4, as if the men on the ridgeline were searching for the shape of a target that had been expected to behave like everyone else. Bishop kept Raheem moving. The doctor stumbled on the first 3 steps, legs stiff from being bound, then found a gait that was more stubborn than stable. Cade stayed tight to Raheem's left shoulder, rifle angled out, eyes tracking rooftops and gaps in the courtyard wall. Mercer took the rear, counting, 11 meters to the gate, 23 to the outer wall, 190 to the first fold of terrain that might hide them. The boy in the dust didn't move. Bishop glanced at him once. Just once. A decision made in 0.5 seconds. Carry him, Bishop said. No debate. No softness. 2 operators peeled off, scooped the child. One under the knees, one under the back, and lifted. The boy weighed maybe 28 kilos, and he made no sound, only a tight breath that fogged in the cold air. The first round struck the courtyard wall at shoulder height, sending a shard of stone past Raheem's ear. The second round hit the gatepost, splintering wood. They moved anyway. Mercer felt the snipers trying to reassert control and failing, because the team had denied them the clean moral trap. They were taking everything. The ledger, the doctor, the child. There would be no forced choice left to exploit. A small correction, then another. Voss was not visible from the compound once she cleared the first 12 meters beyond the wall. Mercer kept his tubes trained on the ridge until Bishop forced movement, and then the terrain swallowed the view. The team pushed into a shallow drainage line, 1.4 meters deep at its best, using the dirt banks as cover while they moved toward Pickup Point Delta, a cleared patch of ground 640 meters east, where the helicopter could drop a line without landing. They had 17 minutes, give or take, and Mercer had learned that minutes in the mountains were not uniform. A minute under fire was longer than a minute under fluorescent lights. At 70 meters out, the first operator carrying the boy stumbled. Not from panic. His boot caught on a root. His body pitched forward. The boy's head snapped back. Cade reached out without thinking and caught the boy's shoulder, preventing the head strike. It was a small motion, 1 hand, 1 second, but it changed something in Cade's posture. It made him look less like a man trying to survive and more like a man trying to be responsible for what survival cost. Mercer marked it. The skeptic's transformation had started long before anyone would admit it. A rehook arrived quiet as breath. The young one had begun to act without asking if the action was mission. No extra words. The firing intensified again at 2 minutes into the exfil. The snipers had re-established bracketing on the drainage line. They were walking shots along the path, forcing the team to keep low and slow. The valley's acoustics made it hard to place origins. The cracks arrived, then the impacts, then the echoes. Bishop's signal split. 2 elements peeled off, one on the drainage line, one climbing the slope to the left, 18 meters higher, to create a cross angle and make the snipers waste time adjusting. Mercer stayed with Bishop and Raheem in the lower element. Cade stayed too, still glued to the doctor. The boys' carriers moved slower now, each step careful. A round struck the dirt bank 40 centimeters from Mercer's face, spraying grit. He felt it in his teeth. Bishop didn't curse. He simply lifted his hand, counted to 3, then signaled a burst of movement. They sprinted 22 meters, dropped, sprinted again. Mercer felt the team's discipline hold, but he also felt something else. The snipers weren't panicking. They weren't overfiring. They were still controlling their ammo, conserving. Men like that didn't show up by accident. At the 5-minute mark, Raheem's breathing turned ragged. He was 58, with bruised ribs and fear doing what fear did to oxygen consumption. Bishop leaned in close. "Doctor," Bishop said. 14 minutes. Raheem shook his head once, small, like a man refusing an equation. "They will not let you leave," he rasped. "They never let anyone leave." Mercer watched Raheem's eyes. The doctor wasn't just afraid of dying. He was afraid of being wrong about the system he'd served. Mercer's radio crackled. A voice from higher ground. One of the operators in the left element. "Movement on ridge. 2 shifting. They're repositioning." Bishop answered, "Copy." Mercer felt a cold thought settle. Voss had said 7. The team had eyes on maybe 3, sometimes 4. That meant the valley still held unseen threats. The air tasted like dust and metal. Then, for 7 seconds, the firing stopped completely. Mercer felt the stop as a pressure change. Silence did not mean safety. It meant someone had decided to change the problem. Bishop froze, fist up. Everyone froze. Even the boy, carried between 2 men, seemed to go still. A faint sound came from behind them, high and distant, like a pebble sliding. Mercer turned his tubes back along the drainage line. He scanned the slope and the ridge. Nothing. Then he saw it, a small flicker, not a muzzle flash, but a mirrored pulse, sunlight off glass. A spotter scope. Mercer's stomach tightened. Spotter, Mercer said into the radio. High. Glass. Bishop's head angled. Where? Mercer gave a bearing relative to their position, approximate distance, too far for a clean shot from where they were. And then the valley answered Mercer's warning with a new sound, a single suppressed cough from somewhere uphill and forward. Voss's rifle, if Mercer had to guess, though he had no line of sight. The spotter glass vanished. No scream. No dramatic fall. Just absence. A competence display that didn't ask to be witnessed. Then the firing resumed. Less coherent now, like men taking shots because they had been trained to, not because the plan still held. Mercer felt the sniper's confidence fracture, and he didn't yet know how Voss had touched them, but he knew she had. The cost of loyalty, Mercer thought, wasn't always paid in blood. Sometimes it was paid in solitude, moving alone in enemy geometry, letting no one share the weight because sharing would slow it down. He swallowed. Bishop signaled move. They moved. Voss moved higher than Mercer would have chosen, and Mercer knew that because the wind up there started to push grit into the team's faces at an angle that suggested a seam, a split stream of air, running along the slope. Mercer could feel it at his cheek, alternating pressure every 15 to 20 seconds. It matched what Voss had said earlier about the smoke column, and Mercer wondered how many times she'd watched wind in places where her body couldn't afford to be wrong. He never saw her, but twice in 8 minutes, he heard the small suppressed cough again, separated by long stretches of nothing. 2 shots. 2 corrections. At the 11-minute mark, the team reached the final approach to pick up Point Delta, a flattened patch of ground 52 meters by maybe 30, bordered by scrub and broken rock. It was not a good LZ. It was only the best available. Bishop keyed the radio. Delta, he said. We are 90 seconds out. Confirm bird. The reply came. 2 mics. 2 minutes. Mercer had learned to translate. 2 minutes could be 90 seconds or 4 minutes, depending on weather and pilots and fate. Bishop pushed them forward anyway. They reached the patch and dropped low, forming a perimeter. Raheem sat behind a rock, chest heaving. The boy's carriers lowered him gently. The boy didn't cry. He stared at the sky with eyes wide and dry, as if tears were a luxury he hadn't learned. Cade knelt beside him, put his hand on the boy's shoulder, held. No words. A final transformation often arrived like that, not a speech, but a hand that stayed. Mercer heard rotor noise before he saw the aircraft, a deep thump that made the ground feel hollow. The helicopter rose into view over the ridge, low and fast, its shape a dark bulk against pale morning sky. Source. Then the snipers fired again. This time, not bracketing. This time, target selection. A round struck the rock near Raheem's head and shattered. Shards cut Raheem's cheek. He jerked back, hands up. A second round hit the ground near the boy's feet, spraying dirt across his face. The boy flinched for the first time. Not panic. A reflex. He blinked hard. Bishop's voice went hard. Pop smoke, Bishop said. Now. A canister hissed, white blooming into the air, but wind tore it, pulling it into ribbons. Mercer watched the smoke fail to do what it was supposed to. He watched the snipers exploit the seam. Voss had warned them. Not in theory. In weather. A re-hook landed, sharp and ugly. The concealment would not conceal. 3 words in Mercer's mind. Wind breaks rules. The helicopter dropped a line. A thick rope fell, whipping in rotor wash, slapping the ground 8 meters from Bishop's position. Bishop signaled movement. 2 operators grabbed Raheem under the arms and hauled him toward the line. Raheem tried to run. His legs didn't cooperate. He stumbled, almost fell, then was dragged upright by pure strength. Cade and another operator lifted the boy again, moved him in a low sprint. Shots cracked, 3 in quick sequence. One hit the ground near the rope, sending dust up. Another struck scrub, shredding leaves. Mercer felt the snipers forcing the team into a narrow channel of motion. To the rope, to the rope, to the rope. Bishop got Raheem to the rope. He clipped him. The winch began pulling. Raheem rose, feet kicking, face contorted with fear, and Mercer saw, in the doctor's expression, not just terror but a kind of shame. Shame for having believed he could bargain his way out. Cade got the boy to the rope next. He clipped him with hands that shook once, then steadied. The boy rose. He looked down at Cade. For 1 second, their eyes met. Cade didn't nod. He didn't smile. He simply held the rope until the boy was out of reach, as if the act of holding could make the world less arbitrary. The snipers fired again. One round snapped past Cade's shoulder. He flinched, then forced stillness. Then, from somewhere above and behind, a new sound, different from the rifle cracks. A short burst of automatic fire. Not the SEALs. Not the snipers. Mercer's head snapped, scanning the ridge. He saw movement, a figure standing on a rock, too upright, too exposed. A man, holding a rifle, firing down not at the team, but at the slope above them. A controller. A coordinator. He was firing at Voss. Mercer understood it in a single cold instant. The snipers hadn't seen her until now, but the controller had. And now he was trying to kill the one variable that had broken the plan. Bishop saw too. "Hi," Bishop barked. "Engage." 2 SEALs lifted rifles, tried to acquire. The controller was 400 meters out, partially obscured by haze and rock. They fired anyway, controlled, but hurried. The controller dropped, then moved again, crawling behind cover. Mercer watched the ridge, searching for Voss. And then she appeared, not as a silhouette on a rock, but as a subtle movement 22 meters below the controller, a shift of shadow that Mercer would have missed if he hadn't been looking for her specifically. She was prone. She had crawled into a position that offered a single narrow lane of sight. Her rifle was steady. The controller rose, just enough to shoot again. Voss fired once. The controller's rifle dipped. His body folded backward out of sight. The moment of success arrived in one sentence, and then silence. The firing from above stopped as if the ridge had been unplugged. No cheer. Just the rotor thump and the hiss of smoke being torn apart by wind. Cade stared at the ridge, mouth open slightly, as if he'd just watched the rules of his world be rewritten without any announcement. A final revision. No words for it. The helicopter pulled the last man up in 23 seconds. Mercer clipped in after Bishop, hands moving by muscle memory. He felt the rope bite his gloves as the winch lifted him. The ground fell away. The valley spread beneath him. The compound now a small blot in a wider field of stone. At the ramp, hands grabbed him and hauled him inside. He rolled, unhooked, moved clear. Bishop was already inside. Helmet pressed close to the floor as the aircraft banked. Mercer crawled to the open edge and looked down. He saw Voss. She was still on the slope, 90 meters below, moving laterally along a rock line. She had not clipped in. She had not signaled. She was not coming to the rope. Bishop saw her too. "Voss." Bishop said into the radio, voice sharp. "Get to the line." Voss's reply came, calm, and it wasn't what Mercer expected. "Negative," she said. "I'm not done." Bishop's face tightened. "You're not," he began. Voss cut him off. "To remain," she said. "If they live, they follow you." Bishop stared at the floor as if trying to crush the words into something he could accept. Mercer felt his chest tighten, not fear, but a kind of helpless respect that tasted like anger. "Bird can't wait," the crew chief shouted. Bishop looked at Mercer. Mercer did not have a command voice anymore. Not officially. But he had weight. "She's right," Mercer said. Bishop's jaw worked. "Then she dies down there," Bishop said. Mercer watched Voss move below. She did not look up at the helicopter. She didn't wave. She didn't ask for rescue. She was already back inside the valley's geometry, solving the last part of the problem, because leaving it unfinished would cost others later. Mercer spoke quietly. "Maybe not," he said. The helicopter banked away, leaving her behind. A re-hook landed in Mercer's throat. The protagonist had refused extraction. Not heroically, procedurally. They flew 22 minutes to the forward airstrip. The cabin smelled of sweat and smoke and a faint copper tang from a cut on Raheem's cheek that had started bleeding again. Raheem sat on the floor, back against the bulkhead, hands shaking. He clutched the ledger pouch as if it were a child. Bishop watched him with a gaze that held no sympathy, only the cold assessment of whether Raheem would become a liability. Cade sat near the boy, who now slept, head on a folded jacket. The boy's breath was shallow but regular. Cade kept his hand on the boy's shoulder the entire flight. The hand didn't move. It simply stayed. Mercer watched Cade and thought of all the men he'd seen become fathers in the wrong places. Fathers not by blood, but by proximity to the fragile. The helicopter landed. The ramp dropped. The men moved out. Weller waited on the tarmac with 2 armed men in clean gear. His hands were still too clean. "Raheem," Weller said, stepping forward. "You're safe now." Raheem flinched at the word safe. Mercer saw it. Bishop carried the ledger pouch toward Weller. Weller's eyes fixed on it. Mercer watched Weller's face and saw something that did not belong there. Relief. Not relief that the team lived. Relief that the object had arrived. Mercer's instincts tightened. Weller reached for the pouch. Bishop didn't release it immediately. "Where's Voss?" Bishop demanded. Weller blinked once, too slow. "Voss," he said, as if the name were a detail. Mercer stepped closer. "She stayed behind," Mercer said. 2 snipers remained. She said they'd follow. Weller's expression shifted, subtle, but Mercer saw it. It wasn't concern. It was calculation. "You were told to extract as soon as you had the package," Weller said. Bishop's jaw clenched. "We don't leave people," Bishop said. Weller's voice stayed smooth. "Sometimes we do," he said. The sentence was quiet, and it landed like a confession. A rehook arrived as a single-line revelation. Weller had expected her to be left. Mercer felt the old anger rise. He had heard that same tone in other men decades earlier, when a source stopped being useful. Mercer stepped in front of Bishop, blocking Weller's reach to the pouch. Weller's eyes narrowed. "Master Chief," Weller said, "that belongs to us." Mercer held Weller's gaze. "It belongs to whoever can keep it honest," Mercer said. Weller's mouth tightened. "Don't confuse yourself with the mission," Weller said. Mercer's voice stayed even. "I'm not confused," Mercer said. "I remember." Weller stared at him for 2 seconds, then looked away. He lifted his hand. One of the clean gear men stepped forward, ready to take the pouch by force if needed. Bishop tensed. Mercer lifted his own hand, palm down, a small universal signal, the same one Voss had used earlier. "Hold." Bishop held, not because he had to, but because Mercer had asked. Mercer spoke to Weller. "Get her back," Mercer said. "Now. 2 birds. 1 for her, 1 for Overwatch. You have 30 minutes before those ridges go dark again." Weller's eyes flicked, annoyed. "That valley is hot," Weller said. "We're not risking an aircraft for 1 asset. 1 asset." The old language again. Mercer's jaw tightened. "Then you're risking everything for a ledger," Mercer said. "And you'd better pray the ledger is worth it." Weller's face hardened. "You don't get to decide," Weller said. Mercer didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. "I just did," Mercer said. He stepped around Weller and walked toward the hangar, where the comm station sat. He heard Bishop's boots behind him, then Cade's. The team followed without being told. Weller stayed on the tarmac, watching them go, eyes calculating a new map. Justice delayed, Mercer thought, didn't arrive with sirens. It arrived with a man refusing to hand over a package. Inside the hangar, the comms tech looked up, startled by the sudden cluster of operators. Mercer leaned over the desk. "Patch me to the air controller," Mercer said. "Now." The tech hesitated. He looked toward the hangar door, toward Weller outside. Bishop stepped forward. His presence was enough. The tech patched. Mercer spoke to the controller. Short, precise, using the authority of someone who had been doing this since the controller was a child. He requested a bird. He requested a grid. He requested 2 passes overhead with FLIR, not for targeting, for finding a body that was still moving. The controller hesitated. "We don't have clearance," the controller said. Mercer gave a number, a designation, a code word that was not on the mission brief. He had not used it in 11 years. He hadn't intended to ever use it again. The controller went silent. Then copy. Bishop looked at Mercer, eyes narrowed. "What was that?" Bishop asked. Mercer didn't answer. He didn't want to say the name yet, even to himself. Saying it would make the outline real. The question had become a name in Mercer's mouth, still unspoken, but present. Outside, Weller paced once, then stopped. He watched the hangar doors, as if watching a lock safe. Mercer watched him back. A rehook settled into place. The real conflict had shifted from ridgelines to tarmac. Quietly, they waited 41 minutes. Raheem was taken to a medical room. The boy was given water and a blanket. Cade stayed near him anyway, sitting on a metal chair, hands clasped, eyes forward. Bishop stood with Mercer near the hangar door, watching the sky. At minute 29, the radio crackled. The controller's voice: "We have a heat signature. Single. Moving. Grid follows." Bishop leaned in. "Is she alone?" Bishop asked. The controller paused. "Negative," he said. "Multiple heat signatures. 7 total. 6 are stationary. 1 is moving." Bishop's eyes narrowed. "That's the snipers," Bishop said. Mercer listened. His throat tightened. 7 total. The number matched Voss's earlier count, and Mercer felt the chill of how exact she'd been. "Any sign of engagement?" Mercer asked. The controller hesitated. "Hard to tell," he said. "Signatures are dropping. 1 at a time." Mercer's stomach tightened. "Dropping how?" Bishop demanded. The controller's voice went quiet. "Going cold," he said. "Heat signature disappears. No movement. Then another. Interval between drops is between 3 minutes and 9 minutes." Mercer closed his eyes for 1 second. He saw the valley. He saw Voss moving alone through it, not hunting, not stalking in the way film sold it, but eliminating a problem that would otherwise follow the team. Bishop exhaled through his nose, slow. "She's doing it," Bishop said. Mercer didn't answer. He knew Bishop meant the impossible. A rehook landed with withheld awe. She was eliminating them, but still no one had seen how. The radio crackled again. "Controller. 1 signature remains stationary on the ridge. 1 moving signature has closed within 40 meters. Silence. Then, stationary signature just went cold." Bishop's jaw clenched. "How many left?" Bishop asked. Controller. 2. Moving and 1 stationary. Mercer's hands curled into fists, then relaxed. "Any audio?" Mercer asked. "Negative," Controller said. "No muzzle flashes observed." "No muzzle flashes. Suppressed. Or something else." At minute 38, the controller spoke again, voice strained. "Moving signature has paused. Stationary signature is shifting." Then a pause. Then, stationary just went cold. Bishop's eyes closed for a moment. "1 left," Bishop said. The controller's voice came again. "Moving signature is returning toward the compound," he said. Fast. Mercer felt his breath release. She was alive. She was moving. At minute 41, the helicopter appeared over the ridge line, low and steady, and Mercer's chest tightened as he saw a small figure beneath it, clipped to a rope, rising. The aircraft touched down. Voss stepped off the ramp and walked onto the tarmac, as if she'd simply been delayed by traffic. Her right sleeve was darker now, blood soaked from elbow to wrist. Her left cheek had a thin cut, dried. Her gait was unchanged. Bishop moved toward her. Anger and relief mixed into something that looked like restraint. "What happened?" Bishop demanded. Voss looked at him for 2 seconds, then at Mercer. "They were on you," she said. "Now they aren't." Bishop's jaw worked. "You took out 7, Bishop said. Voss didn't correct him. She didn't confirm in a way that would make it a story. "I took out the ones who would follow," she said. Mercer watched her hands. They were steady. No tremor. Cade stood from his chair near the boy and stared at Voss as if seeing her for the first time, even though he'd watched her all day. He didn't speak. He just watched. Weller approached from the edge of the tarmac, face controlled. "Voss," he said, voice smooth. "Good to see you." Voss looked at him. Her expression didn't change. But Mercer saw her eyes narrow by a fraction, the smallest of tells. Weller glanced at her bleeding sleeve. "You need medical," he said. "I need a sink," Voss said. Weller blinked. "A sink," he repeated. Voss held his gaze. "I don't want it on me," she said. "Not fear. Not trauma. A simple preference." Weller's mouth tightened. "Master Chief," Weller said, turning to Mercer. "Now that the team is complete, we can proceed. I'll take the ledger." Mercer didn't move. Bishop held the pouch against his chest, not relinquishing. Weller's eyes hardened. "You're making this difficult," Weller said. Mercer spoke, calm. You made it difficult years ago, Mercer said. Weller stared. Voss's head turned slightly. Years ago. The words hung in the air, and Mercer felt the outline snap into clarity. Voss's presence wasn't new. It was a return, a deferred consequence. A rehook arrived as an emotional payoff held back by restraint. Mercer's connection to her was older than this mission. No explanation yet. Only the weight. They moved into a small clinic room. White walls, 2 metal beds, a cabinet of supplies. A medic, 33, clean hands, tried to take Voss's sleeve. Cut it away. Voss stopped him with a small gesture. Scissors, she said. The medic handed them. Voss cut her sleeve herself, exposing a long graze across the forearm, 9 centimeters. Shallow, but torn wide. Still oozing. Beneath it another scar, older, ran parallel, pale, 11 centimeters, healed. 2 lines on one arm, like history, insisting on repetition. The medic reached for gauze. Voss reached for combat gauze first, then pressure wrap. She packed, pressed, wrapped, timed the pressure hold, 40 seconds, then released and checked. Minimal bleeding. She nodded once, as if satisfied with a calculation. Mercer watched the technique. It was competent in the way that suggested she'd done it for herself before. The medic attempted to speak. Voss looked at him. He stopped. Bishop stood near the door, arms crossed, watching. Kate stood behind him, eyes forward. Weller entered without knocking, carrying a folder. Debrief, Weller said. Bishop's head turned. Not now, Bishop said. Weller ignored him. Now, Weller said. Mercer watched Weller's face. He was in a hurry. Not an operational hurry, but a political one. Something was chasing him. Mercer said, You'll wait. Weller's jaw tightened. This is above you, Weller said. Mercer spoke quietly. Most things that matter are, Mercer said. Weller's eyes flicked to Voss. You, Weller said, were not authorized to remain behind. Voss didn't look up from her wrap. I wasn't authorized to be hunted, she said. Weller's face hardened. You escalated, Weller said. Voss's hands paused. She looked up now, eyes flat. They escalated when they decided a child was a timing tool, she said. Weller's nostrils flared. We have a larger picture, Weller said. Voss held his gaze. So do I, she said. Silence. Mercer felt Bishop's posture shift. The team leader was watching 2 currents collide, bureaucratic control and field reality. Weller's voice went colder. Master Chief Mercer, he said. Hand over the ledger. Mercer didn't answer immediately. He looked at Voss. Who are you? Mercer asked finally out loud. Bishop's head snapped toward Mercer. Cade's eyes widened. Voss's gaze shifted to Mercer, not surprised, but attentive. Mercer felt the name in his throat. He had avoided it for 11 years, because naming something made it real, and real things demanded accounting. He said it. Larkspur, Mercer said. The word landed in the room like a dropped object. Not loud. Heavy. Bishop stared. Weller's face changed. For the first time, something like fear flickered in him. Not fear of violence, but fear of exposure. Voss didn't react like someone hearing a secret for the first time. She reacted like someone hearing a door open that had been closed on purpose. Mercer continued, voice steady. They told us it was a program, Mercer said. A way to build eyes in places where we couldn't stand. Language, terrain, quiet movement. They told us it was training. Bishop's brow furrowed. What is Larkspur? Bishop asked. Mercer didn't look at Bishop. His eyes stayed on Voss. It was a ledger, Mercer said. Not paper. People. Names. Lives. And one of those names was hers. Voss's expression stayed controlled. But Mercer saw her left hand flex once, involuntary, then relax. A physical tell. The body acknowledging what the face refused. Weller's voice snapped. Stop, he said. Mercer didn't. Larkspur took families who had already paid, Mercer said. 2 generations. Sometimes 3. People who'd been loyal and then discarded. Their children became assets. Their grandchildren became tools. Bishop's face hardened. You're saying she was... Mercer's voice stayed clinical. Built, Mercer said. Voss's eyes held Mercer's. She didn't deny. She didn't confirm in words. She simply said, "My mother's name was Nasreen." The sentence was quiet. It recontextualized everything. Mercer felt his stomach tighten. Nasreen. He remembered the name. A translator in 2008, 29 years old then, killed on a road that had been declared safe. He remembered her hands, ink-stained from writing down radio frequencies for him because his own hands were gloved and shaking. "My father's name was Elias," Voss continued. "He was not on paper. He was on rooftops." Mercer swallowed. 2 generations. Sacrifice. A child formed from the sum of those who came before. Weller's face went pale by a fraction. "You're not authorized to discuss," Weller began. Voss cut him off. "Authorization ended when you sent 7 to erase a ledger," she said. Bishop's head snapped toward Weller. "7 were yours," Bishop said, voice low. Weller's mouth opened, then closed. Mercer watched the calculation on Weller's face. He had made a decision decades ago: build deniable systems, accept collateral, accept assets as expendable, and it had been costing people ever since. He hadn't stopped because stopping would mean admitting the cost. Now the cost was standing in front of him, bleeding through a wrapped sleeve, eyes steady. A larger threat arrived immediately, as Act 6 demanded. Weller wasn't just a handler. He was the gate between Larkspur's existence and its burial. And if a ledger went into his hands, justice would be delayed again. Maybe forever. Voss reached into her pack and pulled out something Mercer hadn't seen before, a small storage device, wrapped in cloth. She set it on the metal bed beside her. "I copied it," she said. Bishop stared. Weller's face tightened. "You can't," Weller began. "I did," Voss said. Quiet. Final. She proved the revelation was true, and the danger was real in a single act. She had anticipated betrayal, and prepared. Rehook. The ledger was no longer singular. No single point of failure. Bishop looked between Mercer, Voss, and Weller. His voice was controlled. "Who else knows about Larkspur?" Bishop asked. Mercer answered. "People who have died," Mercer said. "And people who have been paid to forget." Weller's eyes narrowed. "Master Chief," Weller said, "you are out of your lane." Mercer stepped closer. "My lane is what happens when you turn loyalty into inventory," Mercer said. Weller's jaw clenched. "This is national security," Weller said. Voss spoke calm. "This is private security," she said. "There's a difference. One has oversight." Weller's eyes cut to her. "You're not a policymaker," Weller said. Voss's voice stayed even. "I'm the product of policy," she said. The line landed without drama, and Mercer felt the truth of it like a pressure behind his ribs. Bishop spoke again, voice low. "You tried to kill Rahim," Bishop said. Weller's expression stayed controlled. "Rahim is compromised," Weller said. Rahim was going to sell information. Rahim was going to put names in enemy hands. Rahim, in the adjacent room, began shouting, muffled through the wall. The doctor had heard his name. Weller continued, voice smooth. "I made a calculation," Weller said. 21 years ago. I chose systems that worked. People died. That is the cost. No villain monologue. Just a statement of a worldview. Mercer stared at him. "What was the calculation?" Mercer asked. Weller's eyes held Mercer's. "I chose deniable precision over accountable chaos," Weller said. "Because chaos kills more." Voss looked at Weller for 2 seconds. "Your precision killed my mother," she said. "And it didn't have to." Weller's face tightened. For the first time, Mercer saw the human cost appear on Weller's face. Not sorrow, not regret, but fatigue. The fatigue of someone who'd carried a justification for too long and found it heavy. Bishop's voice went colder. "You're done," Bishop said. Weller laughed once, short, without humor. "You think you can arrest me," Weller said. "You think you have jurisdiction here." Bishop didn't move. He didn't threaten. He simply looked at Mercer, then at Voss. Mercer understood what Bishop was doing. Making room for the thing Voss had been building all along, not bullets, not kills, but evidence and timing and preparedness. Voss picked up the storage device, turned it in her fingers, then looked at Mercer. "I need a line," she said. Mercer nodded once. He knew what she meant. A secure line to someone outside Weller's reach. Mercer had one. He hadn't used it in years. He walked out of the clinic room, down a hall with peeling paint, to a locked office that used to belong to a commander whose name no one said now. Mercer opened the desk drawer, removed a small phone, old, unmarked, still charged. He dialed from memory. The call connected after 2 rings. A woman's voice, older now, controlled. "Mercer," she said. No greeting. No surprise. Only recognition. Mercer's throat tightened. "Director Sue," Mercer said. "How many years?" she asked. 11, Mercer said. Silence. "Then, what did you find?" Mercer looked back toward the clinic room. He could see Weller's silhouette through the doorway. "I found Larkspur," Mercer said. Another silence. Longer. Then, quietly, "Bring it." Mercer's voice stayed clinical. "I need extraction authority," Mercer said. "And I need a containment order on a case officer named Cal Weller. He just used 7 shooters to try to erase an asset and a ledger." Director Sue's voice went colder. "Where are you?" she asked. Mercer gave coordinates, runway designation, time. "I'm sending a team," she said. 45 minutes. Mercer's jaw tightened. 45 minutes was a lifetime. He walked back into the clinic room. Voss looked at him. "She's coming," Mercer said. Voss nodded once. Bishop's eyes narrowed. "Who?" Bishop asked. Mercer answered. "Someone who still remembers oversight," Mercer said. Weller's face tightened. "You made a call," Weller said. Mercer didn't deny it. Weller took a step forward. "I can make calls too," Weller said. Voss spoke calm. "You already did," she said. Weller stopped. The larger threat widened. Now it wasn't just about snipers. It was about who arrived first, oversight or burial. Act 7 waited in the doorway. The impossible task: keep the truth alive for 45 minutes while the system tried to swallow it. Voss accepted without ceremony. She stood, tested her wrapped arm, then reached into her pack and began assembling equipment on the bed. Radio, optic, small handheld device, cables. Not frantic. Sequential. Bishop watched her. "You're setting up?" Bishop said. Voss nodded. "They'll come," she said. "They always do. Not with rifles first. With paperwork. Then with rifles." Weller's eyes narrowed. "That's paranoia," he said. Voss looked at him. "It's pattern recognition," she said. A re-hook landed. The next attack would not look like an attack. It would look like procedure. The first procedural strike arrived in 12 minutes. 2 men walked into the hangar wearing uniforms with crisp patches, carrying clipboards, accompanied by 4 armed security in matching gear. Private security, not military. Echelon fidelity style. Clean, coordinated, deniable. Weller stepped out to meet them, posture relaxed. "Gentlemen," Weller said. One of the uniformed men nodded. "We're here to secure sensitive material," he said, eyes flicking past Weller into the hangar, "and to take custody of compromised individuals for debrief." Bishop stepped forward. "Not happening," Bishop said. The uniformed man smiled slightly. "With respect, Senior Chief," he said, "this is outside your scope." Bishop's hand moved toward his rifle. Mercer stepped in front of Bishop, palm down. "Hold." Bishop held again, jaw tight. Mercer spoke to the uniformed man. "Show me your authority," Mercer said. The man lifted a folder. He opened it. He displayed a document with seals and signatures, real enough to convince someone who wanted to be convinced. Mercer looked at it for 3 seconds. "It's missing a code," Mercer said. The man blinked. "What?" he said. Mercer pointed to a blank line near the bottom. "Containment authorization requires a code," Mercer said. "You don't have it." The man's smile tightened. "We can obtain," he began. Voss appeared behind Mercer, holding her small device. She spoke quietly. "That paper was printed 6 minutes ago," she said. The uniformed man stiffened. "How would you?" he began. Voss didn't answer. She lifted the device slightly, thumb pressing a button. Mercer heard a faint click. A small speaker on the device emitted a soft tone, then another. The uniformed man's eyes flicked toward it, involuntary. Voss's voice stayed calm. "You're using an internal template from a server in Dulles," she said. "The printer serial number is embedded in the dot pattern on the page. It's a cheap mistake, the kind made by men who've never had to look for it." Mercer watched the uniformed man's face lose its confidence by millimeters. The body did what the mind refused. Weller's jaw tightened. Enough, Weller said. Voss looked at him. You sent shooters, she said. Now you send paper. It's consistent. Bishop stepped forward again. You're trespassing, Bishop said to the uniformed man. Leave the hangar. The uniformed man looked at Weller. Weller's eyes flicked toward the armed security. The armed security shifted, hands moving toward weapons. The air tightened. This was the impossible task. Hold the line without firing, keep the truth intact, while men with guns tried to turn it into a security incident. Mercer spoke, voice steady, to the security men. You fire in here, Mercer said. You're firing on active-duty operators on a U.S.-controlled airstrip. Your deniability ends in the first 0.5 seconds after the first shot. One security man swallowed. Another looked away. They were not eager to become the public face of a private program. A re-hook landed. The standoff would be decided by who could keep their finger off a trigger. Quiet courage. Voss stepped closer to the uniformed man, held the storage device up between two fingers. This is copied, she said. If you take it, it doesn't disappear. If you touch me, the copy goes out. The uniformed man stared. How, he said. Voss's answer was simple. Because I planned for you, she said. Weller's face hardened. The uniformed man closed the folder slowly. He nodded once, small. We'll be back, he said. Voss didn't react. You will, she said. The men turned and left the hangar. No victory celebrated. Just a breath released. Bishop looked at Voss. What are you? Bishop said again. But now the question carried a different tone. Not skepticism. Not accusation. A kind of reluctant respect that didn't know where to stand. Voss didn't answer. She returned to the clinic room and sat on the bed, continuing to assemble her equipment as if the standoff had been one more predictable weather event. In the next 23 minutes, the second attack came. Not in uniforms. In a phone call. The base commander, a Navy captain, 49, entered the hangar with a face that looked tired and cautious. He carried a phone in his hand as if it were radioactive. Master Chief Mercer, he said. Senior Chief Bishop. Bishop straightened. Captain, he said. The captain glanced around, eyes landing on Weller, on the SEALs, on Voss. I've received a call, the captain said, from a 3-letter office that insists we are harboring compromised assets and sensitive material. Mercer watched the captain's eyes. He wasn't corrupt. He was being pressured. Mercer spoke. Who called? Mercer asked. The captain hesitated. I can't say, he said. Mercer nodded once. You can, Mercer said. You're choosing not to. That's different. The captain's jaw tightened. You're making this difficult, he said, echoing Weller's earlier phrase without realizing. Mercer felt a faint grimness. This is what difficulty looks like, Mercer said. It's usually quiet. The captain looked at Voss. And you, he said. You're the source of the issue. Voss met his gaze, calm. I'm the record, she said. The captain blinked. Excuse me, he said. Voss pointed toward the ledger pouch on the table. That book is the issue, she said. Not me. The captain looked at Mercer. I have orders, the captain said. Mercer nodded. So do I, Mercer said. The captain's eyes narrowed. From whom? He asked. Mercer didn't answer. He simply handed the captain the unmarked phone. The captain stared at it, then took it, held it to his ear. He listened for 12 seconds. His face changed. Not dramatic, subtle. But Mercer saw the line between his brows deepen, saw his shoulders tighten. Yes, ma'am, the captain said quietly. Understood. He lowered the phone and handed it back to Mercer without meeting Mercer's eyes. The captain cleared his throat. This base is now under temporary operational restriction, he said, voice formal. No personnel or material will depart without my authorization. Any attempt to force removal will be treated as hostile. Weller's face tightened. Captain, Weller said, voice smooth. You don't understand what you're interfering with. The captain's voice went colder. I understand oversight, he said. Leave my airstrip. Weller stared at the captain for 2 seconds. Then he smiled slightly, a brittle thing. Of course, Weller said. He turned and walked out of the hangar with controlled steps. Mercer watched him go and felt the unresolved tension remain. Weller would not accept defeat. Men like him didn't. Bishop exhaled. 45 minutes, Bishop said. You said 45. Mercer looked at his watch. 17 left, Mercer said. Voss sat in the clinic room, eyes closed for 9 seconds, then open. She wasn't resting. She was listening. Mercer stepped into the clinic room. Why a sink? Mercer asked her. Voss looked at him. My mother didn't like blood on her hands, she said. Not hers. Not anyone else's. She washed it off even when there was no time. Mercer's throat tightened. 2 generations again. A habit passed down like a scar. He nodded once. I remember her, Mercer said. Voss held his gaze for 2 seconds, then looked away. Her mouth tightened by a fraction. A body tell. Not grief expressed, but acknowledged. A quiet emotional payoff. Earned. No extra words. The final confrontation began when Director Sue arrived. A black SUV rolled onto the tarmac, followed by another. 6 people stepped out, 2 in suits, 4 in plain gear with the kind of posture that suggested competence, without show. Director Sue was 63, hair pulled back, face controlled, eyes sharp. She walked into the hangar without pausing, as if the space had always belonged to her. Weller stood near the far edge of the tarmac, watching. He didn't flee. He had nowhere to flee that wouldn't look like guilt. Sue entered the clinic room where Mercer, Bishop, and Voss stood. She looked at Voss's wrapped arm. Still moving, Sue said. Voss nodded once. Sue looked at Mercer. You kept the line, Sue said. Mercer didn't respond with pride. He simply said it wasn't hard. It just required refusing to be rushed. Sue's eyes flicked to the storage device on the bed. Show me, Sue said. Voss handed it over. Sue held it in her palm for 3 seconds, then placed it in a shielded pouch carried by one of her plain gear people. Then Sue turned to Weller, who had entered the hangar, escorted by the base commander and 2 armed MPs. Weller's face was composed. Director, Weller said, this is unnecessary. Sue looked at him, expression flat. 21 years ago, Sue said, you made a calculation. Weller's jaw tightened. You don't know what, he began. Sue cut him off. I know the budget lines, she said. I know the missing names. I know the dead informants who were written down as road accidents and illness and local violence. I know the private firm you built behind the curtain so you could say the word deniable and sleep. Weller's face hardened. That's rhetoric, he said. Sue's voice stayed calm. It's accounting, she said. She gestured once. One of her people opened a folder, removed a photograph, placed it on the table. Mercer saw it. Nasreen, younger, smiling slightly, tired eyes. Voss's gaze locked on the photo for 1 second. Her left hand flexed again, involuntary, then flattened on the bed. Sue watched Voss's hand, then looked back at Weller. She was an asset, Sue said. She was loyal. She was left. Weller's mouth tightened. Loss happens, he said. Sue's eyes narrowed. Loss is not a plan, she said. You made it one. Weller's nostrils flared. You're here because you think you can be clean, Weller said. You think you can punish me and keep the machinery. You can't. If you pull one thread, the whole thing comes down. You'll lose sources. You'll lose eyes. You'll lose wars. Sue looked at him for 2 seconds. Then she turned to Voss. You, Sue said. What do you want? The question wasn't sentimental. It was operational. Voss looked at Sue, then at Mercer, then at Bishop, as if measuring who could hear truth without turning it into myth. I want it shut, Voss said. Sue nodded once, as if she'd expected that. And, Sue said. Voss's gaze stayed steady. I want the people who signed it to look at the names, she said. Not summaries. Names. Sue's mouth tightened. That would cost careers. That would force accountability. Weller laughed once, bitter. You can't shut it, Weller said. You built it. Sue looked at him. I inherited it, she said. That's different. Then Sue did something that ended Weller, without violence. She slid a document across the table. Not a fake one. A real one. An internal order, signed, dated, bearing codes Mercer recognized. Calvin Weller, Sue said. You are relieved. Your accounts are frozen. Your travel is restricted. You will be escorted to a secure facility where you will answer questions you've avoided for 21 years. Weller stared at the document, then at Sue. "This is a mistake," he said, voice tight. Sue didn't argue. "It's a correction," she said. Justice arrived quietly, not triumphantly, with the weight of everything it took to get there. 2 MPs stepped forward. Weller's face didn't show fear. It showed something worse. Recognition that the calculation he'd made had finally returned with interest. As he was escorted out, he looked at Voss. For 2 seconds, Mercer saw the cost on Weller's face, not remorse, but the dawning comprehension of how small his justifications looked next to an actual human being who had carried the consequences. Weller opened his mouth, as if to speak. Voss didn't give him anything to push against. She simply looked at him and said, "My mother's hands were clean." Weller's mouth closed. He was led away. The defeat was not a gunshot. It was a sentence that refused to negotiate. Bishop watched the MPs take Weller. He didn't smile. He didn't exhale in relief. He simply turned back to the room and looked at Voss. Cade stepped forward from the doorway, where he'd been watching with the boy asleep behind him. He didn't speak. He reached into his pocket and placed something on the bed beside Voss's wrapped arm. A small patch, his own unit patch, removed from his sleeve. He set it down like a coin paid, then stepped back. A single gesture. The skeptic's transformation completed without a word. Weeks passed. The mountains did what mountains did. They remained. Snow came higher. Roads closed. Names moved through offices like weather systems. Mercer stayed at the base for 12 days after the mission, then flew back to the place where his life was supposed to be, suburban quiet, grocery aisles, the illusion of peace. But the mission followed him in small, precise ways, in the way he listened for wind seams when he walked past buildings, in the way he watched hands and noticed tremor. Director Sue called him twice. Short calls. No gratitude. Only updates. Weller was in custody. Echelon Fidelity's contracts were being audited. The ledger was being cross-referenced with other records, financial, operational, medical. Names were being matched to deaths. The process was not dramatic. It was slow and brutal. Justice delayed, Mercer understood, often looked like spreadsheets and interviews. Voss disappeared for 19 days. Then Mercer received a message, one line, no sender name, delivered through a channel he hadn't used in 11 years. A location, a time window. Nothing else. Mercer drove 2 hours to a training site in the foothills, an old facility used for cold weather work, set at 1,640 meters, surrounded by pine and rock. The air smelled of sap and diesel. He arrived at dawn. The sky was pale, the kind of light that made everything look honest. He heard rifle fire from a range, single shots, spaced, consistent, with long pauses between. Mercer walked toward the sound. He found Voss on a gravel line, prone behind a low berm, rifle steady. Not the same rifle as in the valley. This one looked standard, a teaching tool. She was not practicing to impress. She was calibrating. 5 trainees lay behind her in a line, each separated by 3 meters, watching her hands. They wore mixed uniforms, some military, some agency. All young, ages maybe 24 to 31. Voss lifted her head and saw Mercer. She didn't smile. She simply said, "You came." Mercer nodded. "I was invited," he said. Voss's eyes returned to the range. "Wind is 6 miles an hour," she said. "Switching every 20 seconds. If you don't feel it on your cheek, you don't deserve to shoot." One of the trainees shifted, uncomfortable. Voss didn't look at him. She continued. "You will not learn this from charts," she said. "You will learn it by being wrong 200 times and surviving the consequences." Mercer watched the trainees' faces. They were attentive, wary, respectful. A program, Mercer realized. Not a revenge mission. Not a personal crusade. An institution built in darkness that would only be visible when needed. Competence passed forward like inheritance. Legacy. Mercer stepped closer. "What do you call this?" Mercer asked. Voss paused for 2 seconds, then answered. "Counter-selection," she said. Mercer felt the phrase settle. It matched what she'd named in the valley. Selection. Now counter-selection. Teaching people how not to be herded into someone else's moral trap. Bishop arrived later that morning, 9:10 by Mercer's watch, carrying a coffee in a paper cup, wearing civilian clothes that still looked like a uniform because he wore them with the same posture. Kate arrived with him, patch back on his sleeve now, face quieter than before. The boy, no longer just the boy, stepped out of a vehicle behind them. He was washed, hair combed, wearing a jacket too big by 2 sizes. He looked around the training site with eyes that still held caution, but also something else, curiosity. Voss saw him. She stood, walked to him, stopped 1 meter away, and crouched to meet his height. She didn't touch him immediately. She waited 2 seconds, giving him the choice. The boy stepped forward and took her left hand with both of his. Voss held his hands, steady. Bishop watched, face unreadable. Cade watched too, then looked away, swallowing once. Mercer felt something in his chest loosen, not sentiment, not relief, but recognition that something had shifted. The mission had not ended with extraction. It had become a beginning. Director Sue arrived in the afternoon, stayed 14 minutes, watched Voss teach. She didn't intervene. She didn't praise. She simply nodded once as she left, a gesture that carried more weight than any speech. Before Sue drove away, she spoke to Mercer. "Larkspur is shut," she said. Mercer stared. Sue's voice stayed calm. "Not replaced," she said. "Shut." Mercer exhaled slowly. "And her," Mercer said. Sue looked toward Voss on the range line, now correcting a trainee's elbow position with a tap of 2 fingers, precise, professional. "She's building something else," Sue said. "Something that doesn't require children." Sue got in her vehicle and left. The air settled again into wind and pine. Mercer walked back to the range line. Voss was kneeling beside a trainee, pointing at a dust pattern on the ground, explaining how to see a seam in air by watching what the dust refused to do. She looked up at Mercer. "You were right to remember," she said. Mercer's voice stayed quiet. "You were right to copy it," he said. Voss's mouth tightened by a fraction. Not a smile. An acknowledgement. "You don't win by being brave," she said. "You win by removing failure points." Mercer nodded once. He looked past her to the ridge beyond the range. The light was shifting. The wind seemed moved along the slope, visible now only in the way pine needles trembled in alternating waves. The opening image returned to him. The valley, the ridge, the feeling of too many eyes, except now it sat inside a different frame. A training line, a boy alive, a ledger that had become an indictment. Voss stood and faced downrange again, rifle held low, not aiming. Just ready, eyes forward into terrain that would always contain unknowns. The wind changed every 20 seconds, as it always had. She waited for the seam, then stepped into it as if it were simply another fact to account for, and Mercer remembered the first time he'd watched her vanish into darkness and understood, finally, that she had never been disappearing. She had been moving toward what came next. Mercer stayed through the rest of the day, long enough to watch the trainee cycle through 18 rounds each at 300 meters, long enough to see how Voss corrected the same mistake in 4 different bodies without ever naming it as a mistake. She didn't say too high or too tense. She put 2 fingers on a collarbone, pressed until the shoulder dropped 6 millimeters, and then the next shot landed where it was supposed to. She measured wind with dust and pine needles, measured breath with a pause between words, measured fear with how quickly someone blinked after recoil. By 1640, the temperature dropped from 7 degrees Celsius to 3 degrees Celsius in less than an hour, and the range began to empty. 2 trainees left first, boots crunching gravel, still silent in the way people were silent when they'd been shown something they couldn't talk themselves out of. One stayed behind and tried to clean his rifle too slowly, hoping slowness would become permission to ask questions. Voss watched him for 3 seconds, then said, "Leave it." He froze, rag in his hand. "You'll overclean it," she said. "Then you'll blame the gun." He nodded once and packed up. Mercer noted the phrasing. Not unkind, just exact. Competence as a moral stance, not a personality. Bishop walked the perimeter of the range once, 120 meters out and back, as if checking for threats out of habit. When he returned, he stopped beside Mercer without looking at him. She doesn't give them stories, Bishop said. Mercer kept his gaze on Voss, who was now rewrapping her forearm, the pressure bandage replaced with a fresh one, done in 2 minutes, with no wasted motion. No, Mercer said. She gives them skills. Bishop's jaw tightened. That's worse, Bishop said. Mercer understood what he meant. Skills were portable. Skills outlasted institutions. Skills made people harder to control. Cade approached from the vehicles, the boy beside him. The child's jacket sleeves hung past his hands by at least 9 centimeters. He held a plastic bottle of water and sipped in small, careful pulls, as if still expecting the bottle to be taken away. Cade stopped 2 meters behind Voss and waited. Voss didn't turn immediately. She finished folding the last strip of tape, placed it back into her kit, then turned as if she'd known he would be there the entire time. Cade spoke once. "Thank you," he said. He didn't add for saving us. He didn't add for the boy. He simply said the words, and his face stayed still. Voss looked at him, then down at his sleeve, where the patch had been reattached. "You put it back," she said. Cade nodded once. "It's mine," he said. Voss's eyes stayed on the patch for 1 second longer than necessary, then returned to Cade's face. "Keep it," she said. "But don't let it keep you." Cade swallowed. He nodded again, smaller this time. Then he stepped back and moved away, without another word. A rehook landed in Mercer's mind, quiet and irreversible. She was teaching them how to survive institutions too, not just valleys. At 18:05, Voss dismissed the last trainee with a nod and a single instruction: sleep 6 hours, then walked toward a low building at the edge of the site. Mercer followed at a respectful distance, not crowding, letting her decide whether the conversation existed. Inside, the building smelled of old heat and cleaning solvent. A fluorescent light buzzed. Voss went straight to a sink, metal basin, chipped enamel, cold water only, and turned the tap. She held her hands under the water for 47 seconds, palms open, fingers spread, letting the water run over knuckles and nail beds, as if she were rinsing away something more persistent than blood. Mercer leaned against the doorframe. "Do you remember the valley?" he asked. Voss didn't look at him. "I remember distances," she said. "I remember angles. I remember the boy's weight." Mercer nodded once. 7, Mercer said. Voss shut off the tap. 6, she corrected. The 7th wasn't a sniper. Mercer's throat tightened. "The controller," Mercer said. Voss reached for a paper towel, dried her hands in 12 slow strokes. "He would have kept doing it," she said. "Different valleys. Different teams. Same trap." Mercer watched her face for any crack in the mask of procedure. He found none. What he found instead was the other kind of wound, an old absence, the kind that shaped a life without being announced. "Did you know they'd send them?" Mercer asked. Voss's eyes finally met his. "I knew someone would," she said. "If not this time, then later. They don't let ledgers walk around." Mercer felt his jaw tighten. "That's why you copied it," he said. Voss nodded once. "That's why my mother taught me to count," she said. "Not money, people." Mercer felt the name in his throat again. Nasreen. And with it, the memory of a woman who'd carried radio frequencies in ink because her voice had been recorded once, and she'd learned the cost of being heard. Outside, the wind picked up. The building's thin walls creaked slightly. Mercer said, "Director Sue, shut it." Voss's gaze held his. "Shut the name," she said, "or shut the machine." Mercer didn't answer immediately, because he didn't know. He'd seen programs die on paper and live in practice. He'd seen accountability written into policy and edited out of behavior. Voss watched his hesitation. "Give it 90 days, she said. "Then you'll know." 90 days. A number chosen because it was long enough for paperwork to shift into habit, or for habit to reassert itself. Mercer nodded. Voss turned back to the sink, ran the water again, and washed her hands a second time, 38 seconds, as if repetition could become a boundary. Then she said, without looking up, "Raheem will talk." Mercer's brow furrowed. "He will," Voss said, "because he wants to live. And because he's afraid they'll decide he doesn't deserve it." Mercer exhaled slowly. "Will he tell the truth?" Mercer asked. Voss shut off the tap. "He'll tell the version that keeps him alive," she said. "Truth is what survives after that." Mercer filed it away. Not cynicism. Another field report. The next week unfolded in increments that looked mundane unless you knew what you were watching. On day 3, Raheem gave his first recorded statement, 2 hours and 11 minutes in a windowless room, naming 14 transactions, 9 intermediaries, and 3 airstrips where local militias had been paid in cash delivered in medical supply crates. On day 5, the boy was placed with an ant 37 kilometers away, vetted by someone who asked hard questions and did not soften their face to ask them. On day 6, Bishop flew back to his unit, and before he boarded, he walked up to Mercer and said only, "If she calls, I answer." It wasn't loyalty to Voss. It was loyalty to what she represented, competence that refused to be used as disposal. Cade stayed one extra day. Mercer found him at 6:20 outside the clinic, sitting on the same metal chair, hands clasped, eyes forward. "You can go," Mercer said. Cade nodded, but didn't stand. "I keep thinking about the smoke," Cade said. Mercer waited. Let him continue. "It didn't work," Cade said. "We did everything right, and it didn't work. And she knew it." Mercer watched Cade's face. The young man wasn't complaining. He was recalibrating his faith. "Smoke is a tool," Mercer said. "Not a promise." Cade nodded once, absorbing. After 8 seconds, Cade said, "She didn't look back at the helicopter." Mercer felt the sentence settle. "No," Mercer said. "She wasn't negotiating." Cade's throat moved in a swallow. "I thought bravery looked different," Cade said. Mercer answered, quiet. "It usually does," Mercer said, "until you're old enough to recognize it." Cade stood then, as if the conversation had completed a circuit in him. He adjusted his gear, shouldered his bag, and left without another word. Mercer watched him go and thought, that's how it spreads. Not as inspiration, as corrected behavior. On day 12, Mercer received a sealed envelope at 1903, delivered by a woman in plain clothes, who said nothing but his name. Inside were 2 documents and a thin strip of paper with a location and a time. For 30, Ridgeline, 1,800 meters. Mercer drove alone. The Ridgeline was 14 minutes from the training site, a narrow pullout beside a dirt road. He parked, cut the lights, and walked 220 meters to the indicated point. The cold bit at his ears. The sky was clear, stars sharp. Voss was already there. She stood with her hands in her pockets, looking out over the valley below. Not the same valley as the operation, different geography, but the same kind of darkness, the same kind of folded terrain that hid both threats and truths. Mercer stopped 3 meters behind her. "You got the envelope," Voss said. "Yes," Mercer said. He didn't ask how she'd arranged it. He already knew the answer. She planned. Voss held her gaze on the valley. "I'm leaving this site," she said. "In 6 days." Mercer's chest tightened. "Where?" he asked. Voss didn't answer directly. "A place with 2 runways," she said. "One real, one unofficial. A place where people arrive without being logged." Mercer understood. There were only so many. "Are you going alone?" Mercer asked. Voss's head turned slightly. "No," she said. "I'm taking 12. 12 trainees. A number large enough to seed something. Small enough to control." Mercer nodded once. "What do you need?" Mercer asked. Voss's voice stayed even. "I need you to stop thinking I'm a point," she said. "I'm a bridge. If they aim at me, it means they still don't see what's behind me." Mercer felt the truth of it press against his ribs. Legacy built in darkness, visible only when the timing was right. He looked at her wrapped forearm, now healed enough that the bandage was gone, leaving only a faint pink line. "They'll aim anyway," Mercer said. Voss nodded once. "That's fine," she said. "I don't need them to like it. I need it to exist." Mercer opened his mouth, then closed it. He had the impulse to warn her, to tell her to be careful, to tell her what every older man told people he couldn't control. But the words felt like noise. Instead, he asked the question that mattered. "What are you building?" Mercer said. Voss looked at him then, full face, eyes steady. "A practice," she said. "A way of moving that doesn't require permission." Mercer nodded. "Director Sue will protect you as long as she can," Mercer said. Voss's mouth tightened by a fraction. "Protect is a temporary verb," she said. "Teach is longer." Mercer felt the sentence land. It was the theme in miniature, clinical, and quiet. Then Voss said, "There's one more thing." Mercer waited. "I want you there," she said. "Not to run it, to witness it. If they try to erase it again, you'll be one of the people who can say the name out loud." Mercer's throat tightened. "You trust me," Mercer said. Voss looked back at the valley. "I trust what you did on the tarmac," she said. "You didn't hand it over." It was the closest thing to praise she'd given him. Mercer nodded once. "I'll be there," he said. Voss didn't acknowledge it with gratitude. She simply accepted it as a piece of logistics. They stood in silence for 2 minutes. The wind shifted every 17 to 23 seconds, brushing Mercer's cheek in alternating pulses. He could feel the seam now, feel how it carried sound, how it carried smell. He felt, in his own body, the beginning of a skill he'd been too old to learn until someone forced him. Below, a distant road reflected starlight in a thin line. A vehicle moved along it, slow, headlights off for a stretch, then on again. Voss watched it for 4 seconds. "See that?" she said. Mercer followed her gaze. "A driver who knows he's watched," Mercer said. Voss nodded. "They'll always be watched," she said. "The question is whether they know by whom." Mercer felt a chill that had nothing to do with the temperature. A re-hook landed, low and hard. The work wasn't finished. It had only changed shape. 2 years later, Mercer would still remember the valley's 2 colors through his tubes, the pale wash of starlight and the darker absence where men with rifles waited. And he would remember the phrase that had started it, "Too many snipers on us," spoken like a verdict. But on that ridge at 4:30, Voss faced forward into another fold of dark terrain, shoulders loose, breath slow, as if she were already counting distances that didn't exist yet. The wind seemed shifted across her cheek every 20 seconds. She stepped into it without looking back.